Our Father in heaven, we're indeed grateful to live in this corner of Zion. We pray that decisions that we make tonight as a council will be in keeping with those that our citizens would like us to make. We're thankful for all that we have, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, all. Today is the 9th day of March, 2021. It's our regular Cardston Town Council meeting. We have a delegation of 4 people: Mr. David Ines, Mr. John Granger, Mr. Gordon Williams, and Mrs. Jackie Miller-Williams. We like to recognize the presence of Corey McCarthy for Channel 32, and we have Mr. Strang, we have Mrs. Gaynor, Tina's there, and we have Jill, our employee, here. So welcome to all. It's now the time to call the meeting to order. We have an agenda on the front of you. And before we do that, I'd like to let you know that we have 2 councillors that are working from home. They are with us, but virtually. So welcome to you both. Okay, so, and welcome to you too. I cannot see from so far, I don't know what that is. So we have an agenda. If somebody could...
I'll move today to adopt the agenda of March the 9th.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Thank you very much. We have a delegation. We're going to entertain them right away. Mr. David Ines, if you like to come to the lectern there, we'll be happy to hear you. Thank you for your time to council. We appreciate that. What I will say at beginning, Mr. Ines, if you don't mind, because you are 4 of you in a delegation, I think you were given 45 minutes altogether. And we're going to try to stick with those time as close as possible. And we will maybe entertain questions after the presentations. Would that be okay, Council? Are you fine with that? Thank you. All right, go ahead.
Start my timer here, just 30 seconds.
It's okay.
Well, good evening, Mayor and members of Town Council. Most of you know me. My name is David Innes.
Oh.
The Ineses and so forth were Scottish sheep thieves that ended up in New Zealand. Inneses were Scottish sheep thieves, but they stayed in Scotland.
So we shall call you Ines.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Since providing Jeff Shaw and each of you with a copy of my presentation, I realized it was way too long. So I revised it a couple of times and changed the order a bit and added a few references. But other than that, it's essentially the same presentation, although somewhat shorter. Several years ago, I was serving on the High Council and had been given the responsibility for public affairs under the direction of President Tom Matkin, the stake president of the Cardston, Alberta stake. In 2007, there were serious concerns being expressed as to whether or not the crops would be harvested. The minister of the East Cardston colony called him and asked if they could have a community day of fasting and prayer. Following that phone call, he called me into his office and asked me to contact all of the ministers of the different religions in town and invite them to speak and pray for a community day of prayer, a fast meeting held at the Stake Center. That assignment caused me to get out of my comfort zone and forced me to get to know all of the religious leaders in town as well as many of the members of their congregations. The community day of fasting and prayer meetings were held every year for the next 5 years, so I had lots of opportunity to interact with those as different faiths. What started as an assignment soon developed into friendship and genuine love and concern for all of those in the community that are of a faith different from the predominant religious groups in town. Since that time, I visited with every minister, many members of their congregations, and been in every church building. I've enjoyed my association with the Right Reverend Sidney Black, Reverend George Ward, Reverend Louis Putton, Reverend Glenda Vert, Pastor Jim Lindemann, Missionary Roy Thiessen, Father Prolon, and Father Benedicto Tagaro. As I stand before you this evening, I'd like to invite you, and at your initiative, the Pickleball Association and other interested groups, to take a fresh look at the possibility of renting, leasing, or even purchasing and renovating the St. Andrew's United Church Hall, perhaps as an alternative to a very expensive community center, which, in my opinion, I'm not sure I could afford, or taxpayers could afford. As you're mostly aware, the St. Andrew's United Church and vacant lot north of it, the United Church Hall and vacant lot north of it, sadly may be up for sale at some future point in time. I have not been contacted by the United Church to speak on their behalf or to seek relief on their behalf. I'm here on my own because I have a deep concern for our friends who are members of different religions. I alone am responsible for everything that I say or everything that I imply. The membership of the St. Andrew's United Church is down to about 18 individuals attending. The COVID-19 pandemic, as well as resulting health measures and lockdowns, have robbed them of their main source of income, as they can no longer hold community dinners, fundraisers, or rent out their facilities. In my opinion, if something is not done to help their congregation, the St. Andrew's United Church may have to close, just as United Church in Raymond and McGrath have recently closed, and for many of the same reasons, the Faith Lutheran Church here in Cardston closed and sold their building in 2014. I firmly believe that as a community, we cannot afford to let that happen. A community is like a tapestry, a beautiful tapestry woven together from many different threads. We need each of those different religions, denominations in our community to help it continue to grow. The elected leaders of the town of Cardston and the community as a whole have a rich history concerning the rescue of various churches and of helping other religion denominations in the surrounding area grow and succeed. However, in interest of time, I'll only detail some of the help that I know that St. Andrew's United Church and the Faith Lutheran Church has received, as well as a little bit of their history. In April 1897, get the dates correct, Reverend Gavin Hamilton was named the first pastor of Cardston's newly organized Presbyterian Church. A short time later, he purchased the lot on which the St. Andrew's United Church of Canada now stands and hired local contractor James C. Cahoon to build them a chapel in 1921. In 1920, the Presbyterian Church became part of the United Church of Canada. A year later, the old church was building and a new church was built in 21. In 1996, the St. Andrew's United Church members decided to replace our old and well-loved, worn-out building and often remodeled with a new church. According to the late Ardith Chernland, a longtime member of United Church and a well-loved senior resident, an open quote, "Many residents of Cardston stepped forward to help with the construction of that building. An active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints donated $10,000. Others donated lesser amounts. An anonymous person invited families to purchase bundles of shingles from Home Hardware, which in turn could be donated to the United Church. Enough shingles were donated to completely roof the building," close quote. The pews and many of the cabinets in the church were donated by the Coots Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Several elders' quorums took place donating labor. Reverend George Ward once jokingly told me, an open quote, that St. Andrew's is the only United Church building in Canada that was built with extensive help from the Mormons, close quote. Prior to 1968, the Faith Lutheran congregation rented the St. Andrew's United Church for their worship meetings and met at a time when the United Church congregation was not meeting. In 1968, they purchased their own building. Unfortunately, dwindling attendance and rising costs forced them to sell their church in 2014. The Faith Lutheran congregation now holds their weekly worship meetings at the Good Samaritan Lee Crest Center. In March of 1991, 5 teenage boys from Cardston broke into the Faith Lutheran Church building and almost completely destroyed it, which, by the way, cost more than $20,000 to repair. According to an article published in the Cardston Chronicle on March 5, 1991, when Stan Johnson, who was the mayor of the town at that time, heard about the vandalism, he called Andy and Joan Strain, who were very active members of that denomination, to ask what their congregation needed and how the town could help. Andy Strang told me that his wife, Joan, was the president of the Women's Auxiliary, open quote. The Lutheran Church Women's Auxiliary had worked very hard for several days to clean and decorate the entire building for a Lutheran International World Day of Prayer. All of their efforts were destroyed by that act of vandalism. Again referring to the newspaper, close quote, again referring to the newspaper article, Mayor Johnson, with the support of town council, told her that their congregation was welcome to use the town building, this building, at no cost until they could get their church repaired. My time is almost up. For my final comments, I once again invite you as a town council to meet with the Pickleball Association and perhaps other interested groups to reopen negotiations with the United Church to determine the feasibility of what could be done to help the community make better use of their church hall, and especially in light of the discussions concerning whether or not the town needs a very expensive recreation center. Maybe there's something that could be done that would satisfy the recreation needs of the Pickleball Association and other parties, and at the same time help the St. Andrew's United Church generate some income that would help their congregation remain an active and viable religious organization within our community. Thank you. If there are any questions, and after the others have spoken, if there's any time left, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much for walking us through the history of those congregations. Thank you, Mr. Ennis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Granger?
Please get the sides here for you. Way back. That's right.
Thank you very much. We had your curriculum vitae in our packet, so thank you for coming so well prepared and with so much background experience. We love to hear from you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My name is John Granger, and I am a citizen and a taxpayer residing in the town of Cardston. I wish to thank Mayor and Council for the opportunity to address you tonight on the subject of the town's infrastructure master plan, the condition of our sewer and water systems, and that of our roads and streets, and how this relates to the town's involvement in a possible new recreation centre. First, a little bit about my background. I am a retired project manager and senior municipal engineer with over 40 years of experience in municipal engineering and urban transportation design, project management, construction administration in both public and private sectors. My responsibilities have included consulting engineering, project management, engineering design, working with and leading multidisciplinary project teams, community consultation, infrastructure reviews, and asset management, engineering-related studies, compilation of budgets, and work scheduling from project inception through engineering pre-design and detail design to construction and completion and commissioning of projects. My wide range of civil, environmental, and municipal engineering experience has served private sector clientele as well as those involved with federal, territorial, provincial, First Nation, and municipal levels of government. My related background work history includes engineering for water supply, treatment, transmission, and distribution, stormwater management, sanitary sewage collection, conveyance, treatment, and disposal, pump stations, environmental legislation, regulations and permitting, urban transportation, solid waste management, infrastructure renewal and downtown reconstruction, residential, commercial, and industrial land development, and the design and construction of franchise utilities. Notable projects include my role as the project manager and lead for Banff Refreshing, a $23.8 million infrastructure renewal project replacing all of the underground utilities and surface works on Banff Avenue in the downtown core of the Banff town site in 2007. as well as considerable engineering and contract administration work at the Calgary International Airport involving the construction of runway extensions, taxiways, aprons, and stormwater management facilities in the 2000s. I have been a practicing and registered professional engineer in Ontario, Yukon, Alberta, British Columbia, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, and I have done sewage treatment work in the state of Alaska. My last job was as a senior project engineer with the engineering department of the District of Squamish in BC, which ended with my retirement in 2017 when my wife Anne and I moved back to Alberta to live here in Cardston. So, the town of Cardston's infrastructure master plan. In 2017, the town engaged the firm of Talbera International Technologies out of Lethbridge to complete an updated municipal infrastructure master plan in place of an early plan that was compiled in 2009. The latest plan, submitted to the town in December of 2017, performed a hydraulic capacity assessment of the town's water distribution network and sanitary and storm sewer systems, as well as an evaluation of its roadways, pavement, curb and gutter, and sidewalk infrastructure. The standards that the town of Cardston uses follow those of the City of Lethbridge in most regards, as well as the Canadian Fire Underwriters Survey Water Supply for Public Fire Protection document for water distribution and fire flows. The information, recommendations, and cost estimates contained in this updated master plan has been adopted by the town in its use in compiling its most recent 5-year capital plans and annual budgets by the passing of associated bylaws. The plan is complete and comprehensive in most areas. However, it unfortunately points to a significant municipal infrastructure deficit in a number of serious ways. Water distribution. The consultant used an updated version of the town's water computer model and ran the calculated hydraulic capacities of the existing water system against current and planned future development scenarios. This analysis indicates that despite some improvements made to the system by the town in recent years, there are a number of serious deficiencies in the existing water system related to water main pipe sizing and pipe materials, resulting in key areas of the town with substandard line pressures and fire flows. In short, quoting directly from the report, the overall system does not conform to the level of service required, as well as the standards set by the town. The locations failing the requisite fire flows requirements are the institutional, commercial, industrial, and large lot residential areas in the southeast and northwest parts of the town, as well as for high-value properties in the north and south areas of the town, including the hospitals and a number of schools. I am not making this stuff up. This information comes directly out of the town's utility master plan, your own report. The study also identifies that upgrades are required at the town's water treatment plant to improve plant efficiencies. Bottom line on the water side of things, the order of magnitude cost estimates to implement all of the plan's recommended water improvements totals some $10.5 million. This figure includes replacement of aging, outmoded, smaller diameter cast iron water mains along the entire length of Main Street south of the Lee Creek Bridge, costed out at a staggering $6.17 million alone. One thing that was not addressed in the study is the inadequate spacing and resulting lack of fire hydrants throughout the entire town site. The town should look into this and include funds in their capital planning to include new hydrant installations where they are missing per the Fire Underwriters Survey requirements, your standard. Sanitary sewage collection. The consultant also updated and ran the town's computer sanitary sewer model and determined that the systems cannot handle current or future wet weather sanitary flows. This is evidenced in periodic and occasional surcharging witnessed by the town, as the system does not have adequate hydraulic capacity to convey such flows in some places, many places. There is only a minor reference in the study report to the existing sewage treatment plant, saying that it is undersized and should be upgraded to handle more flow. There are no details or estimated costs for this, including in the report and the resulting master plan. I understand that the town, to its credit, is now starting to look into the condition, performance, and operation of the existing sewage treatment plant, but presently no costs or construction plans have been identified in a formal way, and nor has anything been included in the current capital planning in this regard. If it was determined that a new sewage treatment plant is required, it would be a very expensive but critically important facility to build. Bottom line, for the recommended sewage line improvements, the master plan provides estimated costs amounting to $4.8 million. Storm sewer. The town's consultant examined the existing stormwater management facilities in Cardston and identified a number of deficiencies, including the fact that the storm system can only convey 54% of the storm runoff in the section of town west of Lee Creek, in comparison to accepted engineering requirements. It is recommended that the town complete, in the report, it is recommended that the town complete a full stormwater master plan to fully understand the extent of drainage and potential flooding problems and what their solutions may be. Short-term improvements in the plan right now amount to $630,000 for stormwater management. Roadways. The study identified a number of areas in town where the roadways and sidewalks are in poor or failing condition, in need of repair or requiring full reconstruction and or repaving. My personal favorite in this regard are those sections of streets in town where only the first or base lift of asphalt was ever placed at the time of original construction, leaving one to drive on a rough and coarse asphalt surface with a lip at the concrete curb line where runoff water from the street cannot get into the gutter line. Ironically, one of the worst areas of town that you can easily see this is at my house on 2nd Street East and just around the corner from me on 5th Avenue in front of the mayor's house.
Correct.
The cost of recommended roadway improvements in the master plan add up to $2.7 million. So in summary, your master plan indicates an infrastructure deficit for water of $10.5 million, sanitary sewer $4.8 million, storm sewer $0.6 million, roads $2.7 million, for a total infrastructure deficit value of $18.6 million. Conclusions. As one can see from this presentation, even a cursory look at this latest infrastructure master plan reveals that an overwhelming infrastructure deficit currently exists in the town of Cardston, not even taking into account what might have to be done with the sewage treatment plant. As an experienced municipal engineer, I was taken aback at how serious things are, especially when it comes to water main capacity and the lack of line pressures and fire flows in certain areas. As a taxpayer, I am concerned about how we will get out of this predicament and how we will be able to pay for all of these necessary infrastructure improvements over time. For example, capital water system improvements in recent years have amounted only to about $350,000 annually. And given what we are up against in this regard, well, you do the math. Think about how long it will take to fix all of this stuff. I am aware that the Alberta Minister of Municipal Affairs sent every municipality in the province a letter last year, effectively saying, whatever you have left in the way of remaining MSI grant funds, you had better spend it on the basics. No fancy stuff or frills, as the provincial coffers are all but empty in the way of further grant funding for the foreseeable future. Given the magnitude of this municipal infrastructure deficit looming over us, and that it is unlikely that we can rely on provincial grants, how can we, in good conscience, take money from any existing water and sewer reserves to try and pay for the town's part of this proposed rec center pickleball facility. I am concerned that we have to get our priorities straight. In my opinion, it would be folly for this council to further put off looking after and rectifying this significant municipal infrastructure deficit in favor of diverting any of our previous identified reserve funds or even any further water and sewer grant money we may receive to such a special interest as this. Simply put, a community of this size with our limited small tax base cannot afford it when we have other more important services that need our attention, tax dollars and whatever grants we can get. I respectfully submit that you, our mayor and council, have a fiduciary responsibility through the obligations of the Alberta Municipal Government Act, your duty to pass bylaws for our benefit, and for your oath of office to look after the basic services of our community first as your top priority. I implore you to think about what matters the most in the provision of these fundamental services to us, your citizens. Respectfully, thank you.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth presentation, well-researched and very enlightening. Thank you. We will ask the Williams to come forward. I don't know if you're speaking together or one after the other. Okay.
It's okay, Jeff. I've had the shot, so just Mayor, Council, pleased to be here and to be a part of this group that speaks to this issue. I have some very strong feelings about this. I've titled the comments Critical Decisions. Most of you I know, some of you that I don't know, just briefly that relates to this process is that after receiving my degree in accounting, finance, statistics, and financial analysis, I was employed by Bank of Nova Scotia and later came to Cardston and managed the credit union for 17 years. And that only relates to the fact, in the course of that process, we financed the ill-fated racquetball court. And there were lessons learned. It was a standalone unit, and this whole process has been deja vu to me because what we're proposing is another standalone unit, and I want to address that in a minute. After that, I went to work as a private consultant and a contract instructor with 3 community colleges and worked with Alberta Agriculture. And it's been a very rewarding career. I served at the request of the minister on a committee looking into the future of agriculture in the province. And I was president of an association of farm management instructors across the Pacific Northwest for 6 years, including Montana and Alberta and British Columbia and Oregon and Washington and Idaho. I worked as a private contractor for education delivery, and in the course of that process, spent a lot of time looking at some of the new algorithms and templates that were available to do what-ifs for farming operations. These gentlemen right here may find this humorous, but at that time, the development of Monte Carlo simulation was something that we used an awful lot in determining the economics of agriculture production. At the same time, doing that, I worked here at home with my family farm, 6 months at the farm and 6 months on the road with this process of consulting and teaching. We always remember the best parts of that whole process. And I became involved as resident consultant in the development and building of the first joint venture organization of 5 successful farms in this province. There hasn't been a repeat of that. It was a unique experience. It was a year of my life in that process. but has been immensely successful. For your information, net incomes of that group when they first formed their association were $2.5 million. They now make each year approximately $25 million in net income. Last but not least, in 2010 and 11, I became a hemodialysis home technician, providing home care for my wife and dialysis at home until she passed away in 2015. What's not discussed relative to this project, this pickleball court, is the cost of operation. And these are the lesson, are the critical lesson that we learned in that process. And it has to do with the farm axiom, land doesn't buy land, farms buy land. And the rec building is a new farm. It's a new piece of land. And it will not be paid by itself. It cannot cover either capital return or operating costs. And we found that out with my previous experience. Will the building be utilized all the time? No. There's 3 months out of the year in this area, it will not be utilized hardly at all. And again, based on our experience, you have to look at it from an enterprise point of view, and you can run templates on it, but the bottom line is unless the weather circumstances are such, and weather plays a big part to it, and the hours are available, there are peak times, but they're only 1 or 2 hours a day. And the rest of the time, we don't have the option of using it. For example, and I want to make this really clearly, who's the biggest competitor to a standalone rec center in this community? And that's you. It's the town of Cardston. We have so many other options, particularly in good weather, that we simply don't use this kind of a facility. And then it becomes a white elephant relative to the process. What we need, if we're going to look at this series, is a symbiotic relationship. You know, one enterprise benefiting another enterprise. Let me give you an example of a symbiotic relationship you have right now, and I found that very interesting. We invited my wife's family down to stay with us, 6 or 7, 8 kids and parents and all of that. We did a very wise thing. We took the trailer down to the trailer park and stayed in the trailer, and they went to the house. No crying kids all night, no feeding meals. It was a wonderful experience. But in that process, I learned what a valuable asset the town has in that campground. It's a really good campground, and we found that out as we traveled across the province. The symbiotic relationship is with the golf course. The people would come into the community, and albeit part of its COVID culture, but they would come into this community with their recreational vehicles and then go up and play golf. That benefited both the golf course and the campground. Let's take that a step further in terms of this proposed pickleball situation. I believe it's wrong time, wrong place, and wrong set of circumstances. If there was a relationship, a symbiotic relationship between the golf course, the campground, and the pickleball court, this recreational facility, where they complemented each other, then possibly down the road, and it leads to doing much more planning in terms of what we really want. If the operating costs of the golf course in the wintertime are offset in the recreational center, and then the recreation center's facilities are used for tournaments and golf course operations, we'd have a symbiotic relationship where we're benefiting each other. You need to think about it. This project has been pushed on us, and we need more thought and thinking on how we can complement the community in terms of recreation rather than compete. I emphasize that point precisely because I think that there's lots of there's lots of wants, but there's one really big need. And the important need right now is this business with our sewer system. And we have the capacity to do it. Do we have the credibility if we seek grants, if in turn we have taken the grants we have and purchased a recreational facility? As a former banker, I'm telling you, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. If your financer has told you what their expectations are, and then you turn around and do the opposite, then the amount of financing gets to be pretty small. My wife has said to me as we came down here, this is the craziest thing we've ever done. We spent a lot of time working on this and going through it and traumatizing over it. But we've done something the rest of you haven't. And that's we've lived in an economy that was an oil-based economy, and that economy has gone down the drain. We lived in Trinidad for a year and a half, and we saw the impact of the intention of spending $100 oil on the country and the reality of spending and only getting $35 oil. And that's pretty sensitive to us. If you could see the infrastructure deficits that country has had to deal with, you'd probably be taking this thing very as serious as we are. It's a real problematic problem. Now, my wife has one of the solutions to this process, and I'm going to turn the time over to her. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Williams. Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Miller-Williams,
Maggie.
welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, councillors, and Mr. Heitzman and Mr. Shaw will be back, I know. I tried to do a bio, and it got so complicated, I thought, really, I just need to tell you that I have one legal given name and 3 legal last names, so it's kind of complicated. I was reading the Globe and Mail right after the provincial budget came down, so February 26th. The front page headline is, Alberta budget aims to hold the line on spending. But on page A6, the headline's a little stronger. Provincial budget portends grim years ahead. Economic effects of pandemic continue to wreak havoc on the province's volatile, oil-focused finances. And on down the page about Premier Kenney not wanting to impose a sales tax. So as you might have guessed, I like newspapers. I like print newspapers. I like to read news online. I like information, especially accurate and timely information, and I like social media too. So I've chosen to vigorously participate in the rec center debate in the local paper and a little bit on the Cardston Community News Facebook page as well. 20 years of training in health research taught me to carefully listen and read word by word to establish the accuracy of anything I find on any source. So my job tonight in our delegation is to cover some objections and topics about the rec center that haven't been addressed yet, coming from a slightly different angle due to my own experience. So one subject we haven't covered yet is the cost of policing in town. Yesterday, I listened to the mayor's recent video on the town website about the community policing model. I was very impressed with her understanding, including doing a ride-along, and Sergeant Wright's depth of experience, especially with the vulnerable, sometimes addicted, or homeless Indigenous population, and his ideas of what could be done in town here. However, in personal conversations, I also learned about drastic changes coming in how that policing is paid for. Since our town is less than 6,000 in population, formerly the police costs were split between Alberta and federal funding, but now the province is pushing police costs back into the towns. Here in Cardston, that added $72,500 to the 2020 budget. And it is planned to increase every year. 2021, it'll cost almost $109,000, 22, $145,000, 23, $218,000. There's also no guarantee that those costs will be capped anytime. And for this amount of money, no additional resources will be added to what's already here. Furthermore, back to our talks with Jeff Shaw about infrastructure and in relation to what my other colleagues here have said, it became obvious to us that a new full-size rec center on the proposed site with all the appropriate furnishings would cost about as much to build the much-needed upgrades as the much-needed upgrades for the sewer system and water treatment plant that Mr. Granger has just outlined. It's true the province has proposed a recovery plan to provide municipal stimulus funding, as featured on the front page article in the City Star last week, but that's only for shovel-ready projects like the needed sewer and water system. Unfortunately, the proposed rec centre doesn't qualify for those funds. An online objection I've seen is that it's selfish for taxpayers not to contribute $10 per household now for a rec centre that will benefit future generations for years to come. First of all, as we've clearly heard, this amount, even per year or even per month, doesn't begin to cover rec centre costs, either initial capital costs or future maintenance and operating costs. The total would actually likely be upwards of $3.5 million. The figure of $10 per household is simply a gross misrepresentation, but it's captured some of our imaginations. And imagination is the right word. There's a huge gap here between dreams and reality. Improved roads and sidewalks, renewed sewer systems, new water treatment plant, increased policing costs, these aren't pretty subjects, but they cover some of the very basics of quality of life. Is it selfish to want smooth sidewalks that our grandchildren can walk on, or to have roads they can safely drive on as they grow older? I've lived in a country without either of those particular luxuries. Is it selfish to want toilets that can reliably flush? The first 6 months in Trinidad, I was there by myself as a widow. I jumped over an open sewer pipe every day to get to the mission office. It smelled pretty bad most days. I've consumed water I wasn't sure was safe to drink. Is it selfish to want our grandchildren to be able to walk home from school, knowing we have adequate police presence in our town in case of emergency? So I've lived in a country where parents don't know if their children will come home, and they sometimes disappear without a trace. There's not enough police to find them. Sorry, I realized as I was going through this that it is a very emotional subject for me, very close to my heart. So it doesn't sound like it because I'm talking about sidewalks, water, sewer, policing. These subjects aren't pretty, but they do bring quality of life in a way that we're not used to thinking about here. Along the lines of wanting accurate and timely information, I'd love to see something done to upgrade the quality of talk around town too. I found the September 1st, 2020 map assessment, as reported by Mr. Heitzma, saying one thing, it said that town could use some minor improvements in public participation. I strongly believe that continuing to depend on the Cardston Community News Facebook site, the local paper, and the local TV station to disseminate town news, while those are much appreciated, that it causes an added arm's length problem of possible mistakes or delays in communication between elected officials, town employees, and citizens. I would hope there might be a way to reduce contention and gossip and maybe have more accurate information. But so far, I have more questions than answers in this regard. We learned from Jeff Shaw, who is an outstanding CAO, is what we've discovered, that the town likes to keep the employee base fairly lean and then less costly, with overlapping responsibilities where necessary, and we applaud that. But for what my mother was fond of calling the Sesame Street generation, media is most easily consumed in sound bites and most often online. So that's another reality of life today. We do trust our mayor and councillors, but sometimes we want and need more information in sound bites before making a decision that can easily be provided. And that's not a criticism, that's just an observation coming from a totally different place that I've lived for most of my life. Maybe a revamp of the town website or even a part-time or contract communications person is in order. In our case, Gordon and I eventually found the information we wanted, but it didn't seem very easily accessible for those who are maybe younger or busier than we are. But the bottom line is, no amount of misleading information can change the facts. Cardston needs very significant dollars to be spent on policing and infrastructure ASAP. The provincial and federal governments are not rich these days, so extra grants for a new rec centre can't be counted on. Not to mention that no private donations have come forward yet. Therefore, I strongly feel we can't justify a new rec centre at this time. Maybe we need to give thanks and focus on the things we have instead. This is a generally quiet, safe town in a beautiful location with a great quality of life. Let's first commit to keep our town policing and infrastructure functioning well. Only then can Cardston remain vital and strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm impressed you together did not take even a full 45 minutes. So kudos to you all. You were well prepared and brought to the table many valuable information. I will open it to council if you have questions for any of our participants. Please go ahead. If not, we will be glad to thank the delegation for all your important and timely information. Yes, we do have some challenges ahead. We realize that as council. And you're right, priorities is something that at the time of mill rate, we are always revisiting. It's part of our council's duty, and we realize that. So thank you very much.
I'll decline the opportunity because meetings are meetings.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We have the minutes on the 5, the minute of the regular meeting of council, February 23rd. Councillor Brown?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 23rd, 2021.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Thank you. All right. Let's go on the 7, other business. On the 6 bylaw and policy, we do not have any items to discuss. So on the 7A, there's an RFD for recommendation from the CCW for ratification. So if you could see in your packet, there were 2 recommendations, and we need to have them turn into motions. Councillor Brown?
I can make the first one, to make a motion to direct administration to investigate the FCM Transit grant when more information is released and report the findings to council.
Okay, thank you. Questions, anyone? No? All in favor? Thank you very much. The next one, I will need somebody to do the motion on my behalf. Councillor Bengry?
Move to have administration register 6 delegates for the AAPG conference.
Okay. So that's a policing conference upcoming.
April 18th, April 16th, April 18th, something like that.
I tell you right now.
April, is that 16 or 18? Anyways, all in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we'll get the detail later on. It's fine, Councillor.
Okay.
All right, under 7B, Jeff, do you want to address the survey results for us? First of all, I want to thank the 450 plus people who responded to the survey. It's been an interesting exercise for many, a frustrating one for some, but on the whole, it worked. It's a survey, as we said. It's not a plebiscite. It will give us a sense of what the community felt at the moment. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, so thanks, Mayor. So just earlier, just before the meeting, we uploaded the results to your OneDrive, and then you also have a copy here. I have no commentary on what's there, and I certainly haven't gone through the 46 pages of comments. And so that's something that you'll need to take some time and go through to get a bit more of the subjective feel to the survey.
Okay.
So for me, administratively, I think we need a little bit of time. Again, these just were available this afternoon. We need a little bit of time to digest them a bit and then talk about what's next. And either that's, if I could throw out a couple of thoughts from administration's point of view, either it's continued public consultation based on this, or if it's taking this context into mill rate discussions on budget, and I'm not sure which should be first there or simultaneously, but perhaps at the next meeting we have some idea of how we move this forward through the end of March and the month of April, so the public's aware of what you plan to do with the information now that you have it.
Okay, I really think sooner or later we need to release that information to the public, and but I think for us, we need to digest it. As I say, it's only been given to us at the beginning of this meeting. We're going to maybe need to have it on the next meeting, give us a chance at least to become familiar with it, and try to see what the trends are in the comments, because the comments are very valuable. And I want to thank, actually I realize now there were 507 participants in that survey. So I am really grateful for everyone who took the time, but we now need to digest this document. So I don't think we can do it today, nor give you an answer today.
And that's okay, Mayor. One thing I would like to just make sure that you're comfortable with this council. The data is the data, and I just want to make sure you're okay if we put that out tomorrow. We wouldn't put all the comments, probably. We'll just put the graphs. If we put that out, because people are curious, they want to know how it ended up. We've had some questions on that. Is there any concern that that goes out soon?
Jeff, the phone call I received from one of the citizens, and then he brought it to your attention. Did we have any more like that? The actual addressing and delivery of these surveys to empty houses and so forth?
Refresh my memory on this specific one. I'm sorry, Councillor. What did we...
The one where he was presented a survey. It wasn't even his address. So he gave it back to the delivery person. And they said, oh, I have an extra one here. Give that to him. And then took the... he observed the survey distributor taking it down the street and delivering it to an empty house. Have we had any more complications like that?
So I don't think it was a perfect system. I don't think it went perfectly, but I'm actually not aware of any scenarios that we had like that. We know we had one group of addresses. One of the volunteers wasn't coordinating them with the house address very well. So when we got those calls, we simply told them, use the code. It's a valid code. Fill it out, and it'll be okay. And but no, I'm not aware of any other issues. We only had, Shem, was it just a couple of, let's call them intentionally fake codes? Of all the ones, I think we only had a couple of them. And we didn't have to really get rid of hardly any of the surveys that were submitted, just a few. We had a couple that were duplicated, so people used the same code a couple of times, but again, that was just literally 2 or 3. It was very small. So we feel that we got good information from those that responded. I would have loved to have seen another, 400 or 500. Sure, that would have been great. But no, Councillor, we didn't hear that as a common theme.
So we were able to cross-reference our codes to the surveys, and good. Yep. Thank you.
So can I just ask you something about the way you have graphed all that? The activities are graphed down on the bottom by numbers of respondents, I would imagine.
So all that was, we were kind of curious internally. That's just a word search in all of the comments. So do not take that as a super scientific method. So,
okay.
So Shem would say, search the term walking track. It came up this many times. Search the term no comment, for example, this many times. And so it's just it's a very non-scientific representation of keywords within it. And we may have not searched every relevant keyword.
Okay.
That would be fair to say. We were just trying to get a feel for the content of all the comments, because they're so extensive.
Okay, so thank you so much, because that was important to me to understand how you got to that graph. Because you gave us this.
With releasing this tomorrow, the graphs anyway, the data?
But I also think that the comments are important. So sooner or later, we need to kind of try to find the gist of it and try to extract that and be able to publish that too. I mean, I understand that to extract all the comments is,
Sure.
or we put them all online, or we try to get the gist of it all.
I will admit, because we just assembled this today, I haven't gone through all the comments, so I don't know, frankly, if there's anything that, is there some profanity or if there's anything defamatory. I haven't scrutinized them to that level, so until we do that, I don't want those to be public.
Right.
If anyone's identified or if anyone's naming other people, I want to avoid all that. So
Right.
once you and administration, we have a chance to go fine tooth comb with the comments, then we can take the next step with those.
And I especially want to thank so many citizens who took the time to put comments and lengthy comments and sometimes extremely long comments. Thank you all for having done that, because those are important way for us to understand the collective thinking of our town regarding different aspects of the idea of a recreation center versus utilities versus who knows what else, from what I can read. So, our partnerships, there is a lot talking about different ideas that we heard previously. So thank you to the citizens. I never think in 9 years I have seen a survey so comprehensive in a number of response, number one, and on the quality of the response. So I'm really pleased that that has happened.
Well done.
But we also have a reality to consider as council, and that will come at a time we need to fix the mill rate, and that's soon around the corner for us all. We received our town assessment last meeting, and we'll have to understand the impact on the proposed budget, and if there are some gaps, we're going to have to review our priorities in general. And thank you. Anything else you want to say or comment?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So thank you so much. Jeff, for the next step, maybe you want to reserve that for the next meeting.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. I just wanted to get a bit of start you thinking about where we go with this next.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's
Do
fine.
you want to go quickly over 7C,
Sure.
the campground design update?
Sharon, where we have some delegates, do you want to throw the projector on and I'll just airstream this so that they see what I have here? I just wanted to bring this to your attention. It's a little different than the original proposal we gave you in 2020. And there's some caveats I want to discuss for just a second on how we're going to see this through. I'm breathing this dang mask again. Brandon's been working on this. You know, it was delayed on us last year because we had all of the riprap and the staging for the work on the creek at the campground last year. And so we weren't able to do any digging on the facility. And I'm just hoping we come up here soon. And you all have this on your computers as well. I just thought with the delegates it would give them some context, but I'll start speaking to it. One thing we want to throw out for some consideration is, and this is a bit tough to see up there, I apologize, because it's fine lined. What you're looking at is the expansion on the south end of the campground. We had budgeted $238,000 in 2020. Make sure I have my numbers correct. $224,000, sorry, in 2020. There's 17 sites there. It's a few sites larger than when we first started because Brandon added these smaller ones that back up along the creek, so those weren't originally in there. And again, the goal here was to try and accommodate large unit pull-through sites. So that's where we're currently quite deficient, is these big rigs that you see down the road, big rigs that people stand for long periods of time. Our current campground doesn't accommodate them well, both on the pull-through status of sites, but also just on the infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure particularly. gets us, is a bit of a challenge. But one thing I wanted to throw out that is totally new since we talked is this building here. What you have to the south, so to the right of the screen is south, and that gravel that you start to see is the parking lot for the reunion center. So that's where you're at here. And as we were looking at this, we thought, what if for the long term of the campground, what if the main entrance to the campground became here, and that you pulled into the campground at this intersection? And so when we looked at a bit of a long-term design, we thought we were going to put a laundry and a washroom in this corner of the campground anyway, and we have to have a fairly large mechanical room to house the water metering and water infrastructure and valving infrastructure for the addition, and the electrical metering and breaker and all that infrastructure for that. So we needed a building anyway, and the thought was, well, if we had just a few square feet, which is a design we have a little later on. Let's see if I can flip that and make it a little bigger for the delegates. Could this become the front desk office, and the traffic would come down 9th and then over 2nd, and then the office is next to the reunion center, and everything is, that's the new entrance to the campground. And also as in this design, and I got to keep rotating things now. Well, this is fine. We can keep it this way. We placed the water in the dump station right here as well. So you don't, in the current one, you got to drive through a bit of the campground and go across by the bridge to get to that. So this concept, we feel, could be, for the long term of the campground, a superior design with the new access. The fact of the matter is, though, is that, and this is something we'll talk about more over the next month, the $224,000 won't do all of this. And we see it as kind of a longer term approach, particularly when we look at the building. The theory is in year one we can build the shell and the mechanical room. That would be, because that's what we have to accommodate all the infrastructure there. And then we can work from there with our guys and labor as much as we can. Some of this stuff we have to outsource, but and start to pick away at getting the eventual entrance done there. I don't have hard costs on everything. The building itself, to be fully built turnkey, is quite expensive. And so that probably wouldn't be in the first year. I just wanted to put this by you. We'll talk about it more as we talk about budget, because we got to look at what funding over 5 years might look like. And perhaps it's not the right project at all. But I just wanted to put it in front of council.
Just one question. All sites on this new campground area are going to be pull-through sites and not backup?
Hold on, I'm going to switch this around. Sorry for making anyone dizzy. No, Councillor. All of the ones, if you can see my cursor here, so everything in here and here is pull-through. These are back-ends.
Okay.
And they are intentionally shorter. It was just space we could utilize along the creek.
Right, but we have pull-through sites for the big rigs, the 30 and 40 footers.
Yeah, there'd be a dozen large pull-through sites.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and I think, I want to say it's like 70 or 80 feet on some of these sites.
The reason why is because the present campground, it's pretty hard to back around those big units into those.
Yeah, so that's the issue that council wanted us to look at addressing on that expansion. So I just put it out for you again to kick around. We'll talk about it more next month. And just, it's a bit different than what we showed you in the first place.
Good, thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much. Jeff, can you confirm the source of funding? It's an old MSI.
That's a 2019 MSI is what it's been carried forward. Now, again, we need to have a good discussion whether that's the right source of funding going forward. This isn't a mandatory project by any means, but it is one that has a return on investment proposition as well.
Okay, so that's for budget time discussion. Thank you very much. Let's go now on 7D, the business arising from the delegation. I was extremely impressed how prepared they were and capable of keeping on time. It's really rather amazing. Councillor, we heard about a lot of concerns. We heard about a lot of ideas. And the idea of, there's one idea there that maybe we need to talk about, which was by Mr. Innes. The idea is not totally strange or foreign to us. Before we started in the fall, we were starting to look into that. I remember Jeff and I had gone to measure that for the Pickleball Association to try to see if they could find space in that building for their activities. And then, Councillor Selk, maybe you can help me with this one. I think the Pickleball Association had contacted the United Church, and we're trying to possibly buy the building. Am I correct there? Doesn't hear me. Can you hear me? I don't hear him. Just a minute. Councillor Selk?
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you now. Thank you. Do you want to address that maybe?
I think the Pickleball Association made some inquiries, but it didn't go any farther than that. That was more of a, can we rent it? You know, what would it cost to buy it? And I think more than anything, they were just doing exactly what we were doing just now, and that's, let's see what the survey says.
Okay. So is there an appetite for the town to possibly contact the United Church and try to understand a little bit the financial parameters around the idea? Is that a worthwhile thing to do? Councillor Court?
I guess not until we decide what we're doing with the rec center. That's my opinion. I mean, why talk to them now if we decide we're going to build a rec center? Then we won't be buying that property if we build a rec center. So I think we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit on that.
Okay, so how does everybody else feel? Councillor Drew?
Yeah, I think we should wait and see where we're, in the direction that we're heading. I don't know that that's a possibility. And when he spoke that he was speaking for himself.
For himself, correct.
United Church. So, I mean, there'd be some things that we would have to check in to see how that would go. So. Okay,
Councillor Barnes, how do you feel about it?
I think we jumped in the gun to look at that. I think we need to find out first where we're going with the rec center before.
Okay.
I'm not aware that the church was trying to sell the hall. I know they're selling the lot next door to it, but I didn't know that they were entertaining the sale of that building. Anyway, are they?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Selk, your recommendation would be to wait?
That'd be my recommendation, Mayor. Let's wait and see.
Okay. And Councillor Brown?
Agreed.
Councillor Bengry?
Yes.
All right, so it seems to me it's a wait and see regarding the idea until we establish a mill rate and decide what to do. Thank you. And after we scrutinize and analyze that, but also believe that Mr. Granger made some very important point that although it has not been looked at always with the most favorable eyes to carry on putting MSI into utilities and repairs, I still personally believe that we can't ignore the fact that the reality is the MSI is going to die very soon, that don't have the replacement formula for it. So we know that next year we'll have half of what we got this year, and the year after we're not sure what it will look like. So that behooves us to be very, very careful of those infrastructure dollars that were given to us by the province to look after infrastructure.
Mayor, I called you today about our capital
Budget?
and what's happening with the reserves. And
Okay.
you contacted Jeff. Can you
Well,
explain that to us?
okay, what you wanted to know, Councillor, you wanted to know what happened to the $1 million when we decided in a former meeting to not have the rec center part of the budget. Right now, it is not part of the budget. So what you wanted to know is what had happened to those reserves that we had put. You had asked me what happened to the $250,000 or $260,000 that is a yearly amount that was normally reserved for recreation center and was part of that $1 million. And you also wanted to know what happened to the $300,000 of MSI. So I contacted administration, as I told you I would do, and here is what I learned. $300,000 is reserved, unallocated, back in the MSI pot that we have. The $250,000 is not allocated to any project, but is in general reserve. So when we come and do the mill rate, this is at the time that we have to make some very serious decisions regarding those reserves. Because right now, the rec center is no longer part of the capital budget. We voted that, and we had a unanimous vote. So that is the state of affairs. Maybe that help explain. Does that help you, Councillor?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question of Jeff?
Councillor Cardston, where Councillor Selk's trying to get a hold of you, Mayor.
Yeah, we're going to, thank you. I told you you have to scream loud. So Councillor Drew, Councillor Selk.
So Jeff, just as part of the infrastructure master plan, Mr. Granger pointed out that it's the $18.6 million that we have of work that we need to do, but part of that plan is to do that on a phased basis, right? And that's part of what we budget every year, and we try to take on this project or that project. And I wanted to make sure that that's how that works, because if we just said to the general public, well, we've got to spend $18 million to upgrade all of these things that are deficient, there's no way that our mill rate would be consumable by anybody.
Mayor, do you mind if I make a couple comments?
Go ahead. To tell you the truth, the conundrum of every municipality is a deficit in infrastructure money. It's absolutely a truth, and he pointed the finger in the right direction. That is a problem for all municipalities. Doesn't mean that we have
That's what I wanted to
no
make the
money
point.
to do the essential. Yeah, we can be scrambling sometime.
So a couple things I did want to mention, and Mr. Granger and I have talked, I think, twice before. He's called me a couple times, and I'm certainly not going to say that I have the pedigree and credentials that he does in this area. That's for sure. So the infrastructure master plan is a document we've had since '09, I believe, was the first iteration that's helped guide our capital investment. And councils of the day tend to look at that and say, we recognize there's an infrastructure deficit. Nobody's debating that. Nobody's debating that in the Western world, frankly. And maybe it doesn't help us sleep better at night necessarily knowing it, but the fact is we recognize it's there, and there's tried to be this balanced approach to investment in that infrastructure year over year. Mm-hmm. And is it as aggressive as we could be? No, probably not. That's a fair statement. We do have some areas of greater concern than others. There was some comments that were factually totally correct, but I want to provide a little bit of context. For example, when Mr. Granger said the town doesn't conform to the standards set by our own regulations for fire flow, and that's a true statement. But it's important to remember that it also stands to reason that historical installations don't conform to today's standard.
Right.
That's a reasonable thing that we always try and work on. So every time we do a block of road, we look at what is the distancing of fire hydrants, what's the condition, should we change them now, should we add someone? We frequently do, by the way, we frequently add when we're doing those roads, and then we inspect hydrants every year for their condition, and we replace them. We've done some this year already. We did one in Moses Lake, and we inspect and check those annually. So, but he's correct. There's a large deficit in infrastructure, and we tend to try and do what we see as the highest priority from year to year based on the assessment of its condition, as far as we can tell. You know, it's really difficult to tell what the condition of an underlying water line is until it breaks. It's not something you camera because it's full of water and under pressure all the time, but we do know the age and the material of every line of water and sewer in the town. And there is concerns around that. There's some stuff that's very aged and of inferior material for sure. If we were to do, and this is really general. This is really general. So we've been able to do 2+ blocks a year, so water, sewer, asphalt, and we try and time them together, so that we're doing them roughly together. And that's been historically since I started with the town. We could do a couple of blocks a year. So I think last year we did the second block of 7th Avenue, and we did 6th Street from 4th to 5th, for example. Oh, no, 3rd to 4th. I'm going the wrong way. And going forward, that number is going to reduce. I mean, if MSI is truly, which it looks like it is, $400 and something thousand a year, then we're probably down to a block a year. And that's a concern because we are not catching up all that much, right? As every year that goes by, the stuff that's in the ground ages another year. And it adds on. So the infrastructure master plan has been a good document for us to understand the scope of that and what the priority is and what we should be potentially budgeting for costs, but it also exposes those deficits. That's what it does by design. And things like we make pragmatic progress when we talk about storm sewers, for example. We know we have troubles in our storm system. We know it's overwhelmed quickly. That's a historic problem with the town. We're just completing with the county that regional stormwater study. And in that draft that I went through yesterday, by the way, there's about 20 recommendations on infrastructure improvements around and in the town to help with that, and policy guideline recommendations for future development. And so we pick away at those things as we can. As for example, with the stormwater study, we got Alberta Community Partnership to pay for that. So as we can find those resources, we try and do that. So I wish we didn't have the infrastructure deficit we did. We certainly do. Some is certainly more concerning than others. This year we hope to do the twinning of the sewer line, which will be under the creek, which will be a very good project for us from a maintenance and redundancy point of view. And then we'll spend a lot of time over the next couple of months talking about the sewer plant and how to manage that. So that's like I said, Mr. Granger can scrutinize those types of reports far more than I can and understand those implications of the type of materials and aging materials and what that means. But I think we're getting good guidance on that as well. You know, that's what we did the plan for in the first place. So yes, there's lots of work to do, and there's no question about that.
Councillor Selk, you had a question or comment?
I have a few, actually.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I appreciate Mr. Granger's analysis of that. We've known that for years. This isn't new information. And while his point of view is that we shouldn't spend another nickel on anything but infrastructure, that's pretty much all we've done for the last 50 years, as far as I can tell. So every one of those streets that we've done within what we could do. I mean, if we take that figure of $18 million that he's talking about, well, we might as well throw our hands up in the air and say there's no way we can do anything, because we cannot tax enough money to fix all the infrastructure deficit tomorrow. So we've done the responsible thing. I think Jeff spelled it out very well. We've done what we could do, and most of the money that we've ever gotten from MSI has gone into that. So am I missing something? Because we've done what we can.
Well, Councillor, I think the MSI was originally designed exactly to take care of the infrastructure deficit in town. That was the sole purpose of the MSI in its inception. And so
Right.
we've done the best we could with it.
So I'm not mistaken. We have done what we could.
Up to
And
now.
We
Yes.
wish that MSI would give us $18 million and we'd fix it all, but that's not happening. So
Yeah, I think what the province is worried about is that because of the dwindling numbers of dollars that can give the towns, they're worried that town get themselves into projects that will only increase the issue with infrastructure deficit altogether in each municipality. That's what they cautioned us through the letter that he read, wisely so, because that is a big red flag. I mean, the government didn't spell it easy for us all. We understood between the line what it meant. MSI is a dead issue. That's about it.
That's what I'm saying, is that even though MSI is dwindling, we cannot tax. We can't make up the shortfall by taxing.
You're exactly right. People would be running us with pitchfork in our back.
Yeah, if we thought the pitchforks and lanterns were out because of the rec center, it would be even worse if we said that, by the way, we've got to take and borrow $18 million to fix all of our infrastructure needs.
Well, when people report that they have backup sewer in their home, I can tell you, I feel for them, because they're right. It is our duty and responsibility to see to it that that gets fixed ASAP.
Right, and I don't dispute that.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done. So I recognize that he's thrown a lot of big numbers, and I recognize that he has lots of credentials, but I think the song comes to my mind, same as it ever was, if we just want to keep putting everything into sewers and streets and roads.
But there are priorities, right, to keep the quality of life in a town that starts there, I guess. Okay, Councillor Drew.
Yeah, I guess I agree with Councillor Selk, but my concern is that anyone listening to this podcast is going to walk away and say, you know, gee, the town really hasn't done their job, and there's $18.6 million that we're in deficit because we haven't done this, and this. And I think it's important for the town's people to understand that we are following the plan, we are doing our due diligence with the monies that we have and the priorities that we've set, which administration does and comes to us as council, and we approve that kind of stuff. So I was just a little concerned. Yeah, I really appreciated the presentation, lots of knowledge and lots of good things in that presentation, but I don't want people to walk away and say, well, gee, town council and administration, you know, $18 million, you know, just that whole piece, right?
I think, Councillor, do you have a point well taken? There has been over the year a desire of council for the past 9 years that I have been there to set aside reserves and to earmark them specifically so that we could have, when grants come available, that 50 cents the dollar. And that's what we hope to do with the sewer plant. We're not exactly at half of what we need, but I think if we manipulate a little bit what we have when we do the mill rate, I think we will be able, if the grant comes through, to have that money, because that needs to be a priority of council. That sewer plant, no matter which way we cut it, is failing. Mm-hmm. It's needing repairs more and more often. and we can't carry on like that. It's an old piece of infrastructure where the pieces and parts are no longer easy to find. So that's the issue that we have with that whole plan. If you could find piece and part easily, it wouldn't be a question, wouldn't be even a worry. But the issue is the age of the structure.
Jeff,
Councillor.
our mill rate discussion start in April?
No, end of March.
Yeah, we can start whenever, Councillor, probably start a little bit 23rd, and
Yeah,
then, because we,
March.
how do I put this? I think you have a more difficult mill rate discussion this year than you have in the past.
Yes.
So I'm probably going to try and start on the 23rd. The only thing is with the 23rd, it also coincides with presentation of the audit. And so whether we can have good numbers for further discussion, we just have to see how that all times, because we just finished the audit last week. And
Okay.
so we just have to wait and hear back from the auditors. So we'll just see how that times for the 23rd.
Because we need to have costs associated with policing and so forth.
Well, we know all that. You've known that for a long time.
And is it giving you enough time to do that?
Yeah, it's fine. It
Okay.
just depends if we have our year-end stuff from the auditor, that's all.
Thank
Jeff,
you.
in the same line of questioning, when do you expect Albert Turgo to come back with some figures regarding the replacement of the sewer plant?
We've been working back and forth the last couple of weeks on that. Not to get into all the details, I guess, because
No.
you don't care necessarily, but it's an analysis of the capacity of the plant. If we can do staged improvements on the plant, what does the capacity of the plant look like over the next 3 years? For example, if we could do half of it now, half of it in 2 years. If we have a peak flow, do we have enough capacity in the half in order to cover ourselves for compliance? So that's where we're at right now, is analyzing a couple different options and what their partial capacities do for us, if that's more financially viable for us. That's what he's scrutinizing right now.
Okay, and all depend on a grant, and we still do not know when the grant.
Yeah, the Alberta Water Wastewater Grant, I don't know the reporting period on it. I'll have to find that out before we set the mill rate.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. All right, that
Mayor?
brings us, oh, I'm
Mayor?
sorry. I'm glad you're screaming so I can't hear you. Go ahead.
So, you know, I agree with everything that's been said about that $18 million deficit in our infrastructure, but we've known that all along, as everybody has so aptly said. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, I still think that we are, among all the smaller towns in our province, we're well ahead of the game. And Councillor Brown said something a couple of years ago, when her folks decided to move to Cardston, how wonderful it was for them to have nice paved roads, nice sidewalks, and good water. And we've accomplished that. And we take a piece at a time to do the best we can to fix things and to replace things. And I think if you were to look at other communities, take larger communities, their infrastructure deficit is vastly larger than ours. No one has a perfect system. Everybody has something to do, to repair. We all have, every single community around. We don't want to go back to the lagoon system. I drive by many communities that have lagoons and they stink, every one of them. They have sewer backups in their homes. A lot of those people are on septic systems. You know what? We've got a pretty good system in place. We have good water, and I think our people are doing the best that they can with what we have. And I applaud the council, I applaud the administration, I applaud the people who do the planning for our infrastructure plan. And I think we've done a marvelous job. And I think our community, for the most part, I think most people know and understand. When you throw a $18 million deficit out there, that's a scary thought. But we certainly can't do that at once. Like Councillor Selk has said, we just can't go and borrow that kind of money. I mean, it's just not feasible. So we do the best we can. We look at the priority areas and we make sure that they're taken care of as they come up. And if Brandon's found other areas that need to be fixed, if we have to change the priority, we do that to make sure that we're okay. So I think as a community, we're in good shape, a lot better than most.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think then the council, I think for Mr. Granger, what I think he was trying maybe to portray, rather than give us those big numbers, is the fact that we need to maintain the system to be sustainable as a town, and I think that makes sense.
Yep, it does.
So,
Mayor,
go ahead, Councillor Selk.
I don't know if this was already mentioned, and Councillor Barnes alluded to it. Everything needs to be put in context. So if Mr. Granger wants to go do the same analysis in McGrath and Raymond and Fort McLeod and Pincher Creek and then measure it all together, I think we come out pretty well.
You bet we do.
I believe you're extremely correct, but comparison don't always keep us sustainable. But we know we are sustainable at this time, and all the reports that we have received up to now point to the fact that we are a small town with extremely good and prudent finances. All what we need to do is make sure our priorities are straight, that's all. Okay? Can we carry on? Do you want to say something, Councillor?
So it just needs to be taken in context so that everybody, as Councillor Drew mentioned, in town understands the context of that conversation.
Right. I really believe, first of all, as I said earlier on, all the deficits that are in our province is borne by deficit at a municipal level, and a deficit for infrastructure in Canada is also an accumulation of the deficits that are present in every province. And unfortunately, we cannot, as you all said, tax people to death to make sure we can replace everything right now. It's not even feasible nor thinkable.
Well, it may behoove us to give the recent study that we did for the county regarding our water system to Mr. Granger and tell him we're actually in pretty good shape, all things.
But I think what Mr. Granger referred to regarding the water is exactly what the latest report has shown to us, that there are some recommendations there that are going to require, a good $500,000 in upgrades pretty soon, and we knew it was coming. The main thing is to always figure out with the Water for Life is when are the grants available so we can apply for them and share the cost with the province. That's always what we're after is grants. Try to figure out how to minimize the cost for ourselves and our taxpayer and how to maximize the reserves that we have. So
I have one final comment, if I could, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
When I look at the number of frozen water lines that we have in our community each winter when it's really bad, they're very minimal. But I watch the news. I saw news in Winnipeg this year, in Saskatchewan, and in Calgary and Edmonton, and every year, without fail, and I've lived here in Alberta now for 47 years, 48 years. And I can't think of a winter that hasn't gone by that they've had a newscast showing these flooding rivers from bursting pipes that are outdated in these other centers, and people that are, just upset because their basements are flooded because the water pressure is so high from those infrastructures. And I don't know, I can't think of only one experience, and that happened in the summertime when there was some flooding because of some, problems in the West End there. But I don't recall that ever happening in our community like it does in others. So I think we've been pretty fortunate. And knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen here.
Well, thank you for all your comments. I think, the public should not be alarmed by the presentation. It should not be an alarming thing, but it's an interesting report.
Yeah.
All right, so let's carry on and look at under 10, unless under 9, if you have any questions. No? Nobody has questions, okay. Under 10, correspondence, we have some correspondence. We have one more correspondence. I think it went through in the paper also, it seems to me. Am I right or wrong? Okay. From Mrs. Mika Wolfs. She mentioned that she's a newcomer to town, and it's an interesting take. So it's always nice to see someone take the time to write. 10B AUMA. Most of you listened to the budget from the AUMA webinar they had. So I don't know that we need to kind of rehash that. The only thing we know is the MSI is going down and the policing costs are going up. That's about the highlights. We don't like either. See Alberta Transportation, so a reply to the IMDP inquiry. So do we want to address that?
There's nothing there. They're just a stakeholder that's consulted and they have no comment.
Yes, that's exactly what I thought. The next one, 10D, Mrs. Bonnie Kawasaki. There's a crow's nest pass from the crow's nest pass. She wrote a letter to Mr. Minister Madhu regarding the desire of the province to change the policing from a provincial police, and no longer rely on the RCMP. I think her letter is maybe, in my opinion, a little, is it? Yes, that's crow's nest pass. It's maybe a little bit too quick, in a sense that we have not yet seen the full release of the study that was done by the province. So I think before we jump the gun on that one, we should really get the full study and understand it. Yes, Councillor Drew.
When MLA Scow was here, he talked about the province making the decision because there was large support, and in this letter it says that 65% of the respondents did not support this idea, so I don't know where that information is coming.
The number seems odd to me. I did not know where that number came from, because when we did the polling, if that's what referred to, it was 81% against it. If that 65% refers to the polling that the firm did, we do not know. It doesn't say. It should have had a proper reference.
It was 81% satisfied, 70% against the 70% opposed replacing with Alberta Police Force.
Right, but the 65%, I don't know where it's coming from. So we have to wait. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun on this
Okay,
one.
all right, thank you. Then the Alberta Municipal Affairs, well, you can see what's happened. I'm glad we got our funding. When we got our funding for mitigation of disaster recovery program, is
We have 50% of our funding. We're waiting.
50, yeah.
yeah, we're waiting for the other one, you're right.
Under the old program.
Yeah, but now it's 90-10, right?
Yes, correct.
The 90-10 kind of program. All right, so as far as we are concerned, there are no confidential items, so I would entertain a motion. Councillor Court?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all of you, to the Temple City South. Now I recognized you there. And to Channel 32 and to our gallery. Andy.